any key. Where's the any key?
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules. Rule number 1. No touching of the hair or face.
Of course.
And that's it! Now let's do this!
Booster.
Go.
Retro.
Go.
Vital.
We go fly.
Guidance.
Guidance, go.
Okay, man, let's turn and burn.
Launch control, this is Houston. We are go for launch.
Dive, dive, dive. Let's put the hammer down.
Intruder alert! Intruder alert!
Get off my bridge!
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Nine! Yes! Yes! Yes!
Roger that.
Are you ready for a war?
Count up the usual suspects.
Follow me.
Certainly! What have I got to lose?
Hello?
Hello! Hello! Hello!
Smoke and mirrors, guys. Welcome to the movie factory.
I know who I am. I'm a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude.
Yeah.
Right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
I thought I told you never to interrupt me while I'm working.
Proceed.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Isn't it about time for somebody's favorite radio program?
There is nothing wrong with your radio. Do not attempt to adjust it or change the station. We are in control. We will control the frequency and amplitude modulation. We will control the super heterodyne matrix. We are in control, baby, so keep your hand off the nose.
Take it away, boss.
Do not be fooled. Tonight's program may seem, at first glance, to be a light-hearted romp down memory lane. Well, it is, in fact, a reminder of your own grim mortality. Because the fact is, if you are of a certain age and you grew up in the Philadelphia area, then you are one of us tonight. You may have been raised by your parents, nice middle-class people who lived in, I don't know, places like Upper Darby or Levittown or even the Main Line. You may think that they raised you, but they didn't. The people who really raised you were the people that connected with you as you sat there cross-legged on the floor, staring into that 17-inch black and white picture, that flickering image that connected us inextricably to a handful of people who, I dare say, had more influence over our young lives and what we eventually became than probably anyone else. Because here's my working hypothesis. We, and by we, I'm including you if you were born anywhere from, let's say, roughly on the older end, if you were born in the early 50s, 51, 52, really all the way up to like 1961. There's like a 10-year span here. All right, if you were in that 10-year span, you are the last television generation. By which I mean, we weren't around when it was invented necessarily. It was already here on the scene when we came of age and showed up sitting in front of it. But you see, for us it was magic. For us, it was really influential. For our parents, it was something that they really didn't quite believe ever would happen. And for our kids, it's something that's taken for granted. It has, as they say, disappeared through the skylight. There's no magic in television for them, no magic in radio for that matter. For them, the image, the word, the music, the media, the technology is all just taken for granted. But for us, staring into that little flickering black and white image, it transported us, it babysat us, it taught us, it molded us, it shaped us in ways that I dare say we never understood. So if you're one of those people who likes to think that they were born 20 minutes ago and has no personal history, tonight's program could be very, very, very traumatic for you. If you are still trying to maintain the illusion that you are a hip, happening man or woman of 2014 who clearly has no connection to those bygone times, then you'd best just tune right on down the dial where they're playing Beyonce 8 times an hour right now, because this place is no place for you tonight. If, on the other hand, you are ready to hotwire into your past, you're ready to hear voices that you haven't heard in a long time, at least not when you're taking your medication, then stay tuned, gang. Tonight's Theater of the Mind is especially for you.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
We shall certainly do that. So, gang, tonight I'm not even flying the ship solo. I've got Karen here with me, who typically is with me on Sundays, but she's here because she qualifies as an official Philadelphia kid type within that 10-year span. And Ed McDonough, who has not left the building, he qualifies. He was a kid during that time span as well. Even Joe Sheridan, wet behind the ears though he may be, I think, would remember some of this stuff. We're going to talk about a very special time and place tonight, and that is Philadelphia, specifically broadcast Philadelphia, TV Philadelphia, kid broadcast TV Philadelphia, in a time period that spans both the 50s and most of the 60s. We're basically going to take you from Bertie the Bunyip to Captain Noah, from Wee Willie to Captain Philadelphia. They're all in there, and possibly even if we have enough time tonight, and probably, honestly, we don't. Tonight's show really is like 2 pounds of salami in a 1 pound bag. So it was nice of Joe Sheridan to just agree to do his show next week and let us fill in the rest of the time. We might even have time to get to an episode of Saturday Night Dead from 1988 with the infamous Karen Sciola, otherwise known as the Man-Eater of Manayunk. Tonight we are going to feature, in addition to the aforementioned, we will have Chief Halftown is somebody we're going to be talking about. Of course, Sally Starr, who is probably the queen of them all in many ways.
I really looked up to her.
Yeah. Well, think about it. She was an
awesome.
Early feminist role model.
Right.
She was a good-looking woman who wore a gun. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, but in those politically incorrect days, she carried a piece in the early shows, if you look back.
So she did,
So she did.
Yeah.
So no pacifist was Sally, and we're going to hear a story tonight about how she got into a fist fight with a woman on a movie set and gave as good as she got. Sally was no pushover. We'll also, of course, be talking about some lesser-known names. Rex Morgan, for example. How many of you remember who Rex Morgan was? He was, in many ways, the male counterpart to Sally Starr. Sally Starr paved the way for Rex. He was also a guy that wore a cowboy hat and had that hey, howdy shucks thing that he did. Okay, we're talking a little bit about him. No show about Philadelphia kid broadcast pioneers would be complete without talking at some length about the ubiquitous, that's a multisyllabic word for those of you in Lower Township, the ubiquitous Wee Willie Weber.
Oh, he was I loved him.
Who was
wonderful.
Everywhere at all times, and one time estimated that between his stint at Channel 6 WFIL, and later WPHL, Channel 17. He did something on the order of like 300,000 hours of television in the span of his career, not to mention radio, a career that began in U.S. Armed Forces radio in Korea, and then spanned his years on middle-of-the-road stations like WPEN in the Philadelphia market. So, gang, we have a lot of stuff to get to tonight. And, of course, because it's me, it all culminates in a story. A story that I really had no idea I was going to tell tonight until I began doing the research for this show. And, you know, it's funny what your memory does. You think you remember, but what you really do is just put an icon there in your brain, this little image, and you'll assign a name to it, but you don't look at it closely. Iconic. I mean, again, I'm going to say to you a name like Sally Starr, and you immediately, oh yeah, Sally Starr, she played Three Stooges cartoons and Popeye cartoons, and she had the thing, and she sang the song. But then you actually go back and watch Sally Starr's stuff, and you remember stuff you hadn't remembered. Gene London, same. We're going to talk a lot about Gene London tonight. There's one name that I haven't mentioned yet. I'll go ahead and I'm going to put his name out there now, but we're going to work up to him. He's the last person we're going to talk about tonight, and that is Happy the Clown. Even saying the name. Anyway, Happy the Clown, which we're going to get to later. That's what we'll get to toward the end. But we have to start somewhere. Now, here's another one. I have this working hypothesis. Anybody who listens to this show knows that one of the things that I really truly believe, and it's what fascinates me, I think, about remembering stuff from my own life and from the lives of other people is it fascinates me to think about how we got to be who we are. You know, believe it or not, those of you who are enlightened, hip children of 2014, you didn't just emerge fully grown. I know you think you did. That you just didn't become this fully realized epitome of civilized mankind just like that. It wasn't just, you know, when you went to your great liberal arts college that they turned you into this hip, deep thinking soul that you are. No. Once upon a time, especially if you're of this era, you were sitting there with this. If you were a boy type, you probably had this really bad buzz cut. You know, and you had a striped shirt on, and they called them dungarees back in those days, right?
Yes, they did.
And if you were a girl, you probably had one of the little dresses on, right? That they used to wear like little dresses and had a little bow in your hair.
Cotton dress, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's you.
Ankle socks.
Guess what? You're in black and white. You know? And you're sitting there, and you got like a lollipop shoved in your trap, you know, and you're on a sugar high, and it's after school, and these two big wide eyes are staring up at this screen, this little flickering black and white oracle from which we take our truth, our cues, right? Because you're just a little lump of clay. You're just this little lump of clay sitting there saying, mold me, shape me, make me into something, and they did. Now, here's the thing. Not only, of course, are we the last television generation, truly the last, because after, maybe this extended into the 70s a bit, but if you were born after the mid to late 60s, television for you was not a big deal. For us, it was a big deal. This also coincides with a time that is long gone, never to return, when local stations produced their own programming. Now, it's hard to imagine now, when virtually the only thing that comes out of a local station is the news, that there was a time when a TV station, especially in a major market like Philadelphia, was, like its radio counterparts of a bygone era, a fully realized production facility. They had orchestras, they had original, they had writers, they had set builders, they had huge sound stages, and they created their own programming. They didn't wait for something to come down the pipe from the network. They weren't all plugged into the same big central source from LA or New York. We did it here ourselves, okay? And so that's why the experience, the child rearing, if you will, that you got here as a Philly kid, I would argue was significantly different from what you got if you grew up in New York or Cleveland or Los Angeles. They might have been similar, but not the same. And we're going to start out with a guy tonight who in many ways I think is the most unique of all of them. I guarantee you he did not have a counterpart in any other market. And if you look at any other market, there were probably people who looked a little bit like Gene London. There were probably people who were, if not Sally Starr, I'm sure there were other people who put on a cowboy hat and did kind of what she did, especially once she began to do it. Pixanne was kind of an original. But then again, she had a lot of copiers. There was a lot of people that were Pixanne-like out there that worked in, in small markets like Columbus, Ohio, or Pensacola, Florida. But we had somebody. We had somebody that, well, I guarantee nobody else had. I'm not even going to give him any more preamble here. I just want you to, again, I want you to close your eyes.
I can't wait to find out who
I want you to imagine now. I want you to imagine yourself that little black and white lump of clay sitting in front of the tube. And then we're going to try to figure out what this means.
Good morning, tribal members. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Easter Sicily. Pizza tulahe tatitska. That's for the old guys that used to watch my show when they were kids. Now they're watching my show with their children, and what a thrill it is for me.
All right, can you name that voice?
Oh, can I?
Can you name that voice?
Pick on me.
Little girl in the front, yes?
Yes, that's Chief Halftown.
Yes, that is Chief Halftown. Now, Chief Halftown was, by the way, not a pretend, they called them Indians back then. Mm-hmm. Now they're Native Americans. Chief Halftown was never a Native American. He was a full-blooded Seneca Indian. And he hosted Philadelphia's longest-running kids' TV show. It actually ran all the way from 1951 to what year do you think? You're never going to believe this. Think hard. You'll never guess this.
70.
No, not even close. Not even close.
Really?
Ed, you have a guess out there in the peanut gallery?
Started 51, so I would say, I thought it was like 71.
Nope. 1999.
Get out.
He ran until 1999, and
goodness.
he actually passed away shortly thereafter, at the age of 87. Now, Chief Halftown. So how does a full-blooded Seneca Indian all of a sudden show up on a kids show?
No idea.
He actually had a really interesting background. He grew up in Jamestown, New York. He was, before he got here to Philadelphia, to this area, he was a U.S. Army veteran in World War II. He was a nightclub singer.
Really?
A radio disc jockey at different stations in the area of WFIL. He was one of the old boss jocks before there were boss jocks.
Wow.
He was also, by the way, an avid bowler. Can you picture Chief Halftown rolling a frame?
No, I can't.
He was.
No.
He was an avid bowler. And actually, he worked.
I can't even picture him without his headdress.
I know.
On. I just can't. Yeah,
I know.
Those feathers would have been flying all over the alley.
Exactly. In point of fact, he also, in addition to his day job, if you will, he worked as a consultant for Brunswick Bowling. That's what a good bowler he was.
How about that? Wow.
So that was, and by the way, his actual name was Halftown. That was his real name. So so when he passed away, he was 86 years old, and he lived kind of local. He was in Brigantine. Now, what I want to get to here is that what did that strange saying mean? That's the thing I could never quite figure out.
I don't know.
Well, honestly, I'm going to see if I can pronounce it phonetically here. This is what he would say at the beginning of every show.
Okay.
Okay. He would say, "Ista Sosawe." How was that? Was that a pretty good Seneca impression?
Sure.
Now, according to Sally Starr, who was his colleague and friend, that was Seneca for "Let's get started." No, I don't buy that. I'm sorry. Because, see, I believe...
What do you think?
Well, I'm going to tell you my theory. It's a dark theory. Most of my theories are dark theories.
Yes,
you see, think about what happened to our generation. Maybe people a tad older than us. These were the people that in a few years were out there rioting on college campuses and burning draft cards, and they were members of the underground and SDS and all that crazy stuff, right? Now, I think Chief Halftown was planting the seed early. I think it meant burn your draft card, kill your parents. That's just a theory. Just a theory.
Oh, that gentle soul would never have said something.
But there,
like
well,
that.
there is Chief. And if you go out there on the Tube of You and just enter in the name Chief Halftown, you will not only find some original footage of him, you will also find, I found a great, which I'd love to play for you, but it's a silent film. It doesn't work well on the radio. It was someone's 8mm movie of Chief Halftown officiating at a Christmas parade in 1951. Great footage. So there you go. So Chief Halftown. So he was one of them.
He was wonderful.
So we got I remember sitting.
Yeah.
And I remember having this cheesy headdress that I made out of construction paper.
Sure.
Right, and these like bad feathers that my mother got from
And
the 5
Elvis
and
glue.
10. Exactly. And sitting there and feeling he would say, "Hello, tribal members." I felt like I was, So there we had that. So this is what's ironic. Two of the most iconic figures in our world, one of which was a full-blooded Seneca Indian, and the other was a representation of the American West, a cowgirl. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Who carried a rod.
That's an odd juxtaposition.
Who carried a gun and probably in bad westerns would be shooting at the end. Now this set up an interesting, weird tension in my life. I remember well, wait a minute. If you watch bad westerns, they're shooting each other and fire, but now I couldn't understand. So already, you see, they were crazy. They were making me crazy. Now, I'm going to tell you some things about Sally Starr that I know you don't know.
Okay.
She, not only other than the fact that she dated Ed McDonough. We know that. She dated Ed McDonough for several years, and they tried to keep the affair a secret, but, Ed, don't even try to deny it.
Oh, my
One
God.
quick question for you. Do
Yeah.
you think if she were going to
She was a real cougar.
with a holster and a gun, that she would be allowed to have that show on the air today?
No.
Probably not.
No, none of these shows will be allowed on the air today.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact, when we get to Happy the Clown later, he closed every show with a prayer. He talked about God.
Yeah.
That would never happen.
Times have changed.
Okay, so first, so a couple things about Sally that you don't know other than the affair with Ed. She, of course, well, it's true. It's amazing how these people have ripples in your life. The one major thing Sally Starr did for me, aside from, I was going to say my first crush, followed by, I still lust after Pixanne. I'm sorry, I just do. I look at that old footage and I just get, Pixanne was so hot. Anyway, she introduced me and a legion of others to the Three Stooges. Think about that, right?
Yeah.
You would not hear the iconic words, "Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting," at the beginning of my show had it not been for Sally Starr.
That's right.
Because the staple, other than her standing there being our, your gal Sal and all that stuff, is she played Popeye cartoons.
Yes.
And she played Three Stooges, right?
Really?
Now, the Three Stooges were...
I watched them every day.
Of course you did.
Yes.
Now, you don't think that did something to the synapses in your brain?
Maybe that's why I like hockey so
Think
much.
I'm serious. Think about that. Now, I want you to think of the politically incorrect thing that was happening. There's a woman wearing a gun introducing the Three Stooges, which is violent, physical humor.
Yes.
Not to mention double entendre wordplay. It would never fly today.
No, it wouldn't.
Never in a million years would it fly today. So
And just, it's really sad because our kids are missing out on that. Really, really fabulous experience.
Well, absolutely they are. So here's the thing. The Three Stooges were so grateful to Sally that, they actually put her in a movie.
I would love to see
They
that.
did indeed. Well, and it was one of their later ones. I don't know that I would put it in, and it was not in their glory days, but when, of course, all of a sudden, the Stooges, whose careers were essentially over, suddenly have this great resurgence in the 50s and the 60s because Sally Starr and some of her counterparts in other markets began to play their shorts because it was perfect for television.
Sure.
They ran 15 minutes long. They were funny. They were great for kids. Of course, then they thought they were great for kids. So let's hear a little bit about Sally, about her, and also in her own words.
Okay.
With the help of Sally Starr and other kids show hosts around the country, the Three Stooges found a new generation of young fans and showed their appreciation by inviting several hosts to star in their next Hollywood epic, The Outlaws is Coming. Sally saw screen time as who else? Belle Starr.
That's where I have a fight with Nancy Kovac, and she had to pull sex into this. I didn't like it, but I did it. When we were fighting, she said, "Sally, I have a breakaway dress on. So what do you want me to do, rip it off you?" she broke my jaw. Well, she drew back and clipped me. I must have moved the wrong way, but she got me right on the chin, and I went, you know what, over 10 cups, and hit the flat, knocked the whole city down.
Despite the protests of thousands of youngsters, the end of the TV trail for Sally came in 1971, and she retired to Florida. Sally would return to the Delaware Valley periodically to tape a new series, Sally Starr's Western Theater, in the 1980s.
Remember, I love you lots. Love, luck, and lollipops. Bye for now.
It was during one of those visits up north in 1987 that disaster struck. Faulty wiring in Sally's Fort Lauderdale home sparked a blaze that consumed the entire structure. Everything, including precious mementos of her TV heyday, went up in smoke, seemingly in an instant.
I got on a plane, went back to Florida, and when I walked up and I seen that house, I said, oh my God. My fans, they came to my aid in a lot of ways. A lot of them sent me their memorabilia they had of me.
Sally's had some bumps in the road, but like any good cowgirl, she keeps saddling up. And now she's back with us, this time for good. And that star power from her days on Popeye Theater, well, it shines undiminished to this day.
This is Sally's. I love Sally.
Of course, the truth is, this clip was done a few years ago. Actually, Sally passed away at the age of 91. And I think the last thing she said was, I love Ed McDonough. I believe those were her last words. Now, you might think that you know everything there is to know about Sally Starr. But of course you don't. Because before she became an iconic children's broadcaster, a kids show host, she was a lot of other stuff. She was a radio DJ, also on WFIL. She also had a budding music career. She released a couple of singles. And we have one of them here. You know, Joe Sheridan, this, my friend, is a real timeless track. So yeah, gang, this is Sally Starr when she was an aspiring rock and roll singer. And by the way, the plot thickens. In addition to the torrid affair with Ed McDonough, we now come to learn that she has the same birthday as Joe Sheridan. I think there's enough. Something's going on here, which leads me to this. Wait a minute, I think I figured it out. Joe Sheridan is the love child of Ed McDonough and Sally Starr. Oh my God, you heard it here first.
Jack and Jill, you know, joining in the show. To a Mother Goose verse, they're rocking in the nursery.
Yeah. So the nursery she was rocking and apparently was Joe's, I guess. This is the stuff you'll learn on this show, gang.
There you go. Boy,
so, again, we could do an entire hour on Sally Starr, but we have miles to go before we sleep. Now, in some ways, there were, now let's think about this. So far we've talked about Chief Halftown, we've talked about Sally Starr. They, of course, were both on Channel 6, WFIL, back in the days when they were at 46th and Market. That's where their studios were before they moved out to Monument Avenue. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and before they were WPVI.
Yes, they didn't become PVI until 1970. I think 70, 71, somewhere in that general vicinity.
76.
But in some ways, here's another guy. Now, this next guy we're going to talk about, actually, in some ways, probably, I'm going to do him now because he started at WFIL television. Actually, he began at WFIL radio, again, made the crossover to television. And probably is the most iconic Philadelphia broadcaster who's still around, who still lives, and that's Wee Willie Weber. Of course, ironically named because Wee Willie stood like 6'4". He was anything but wee.
He was.
In fact, I remember as a kid, an older kid, seeing him in a restaurant somewhere, like in Roxborough one time, and he was just this huge hulking figure that kind of took over the entire table. But Wee Willie Weber, again, he begins his career at WFIL. He did everything. He did a morning show. He did a kids show. He did a game show. He would actually go across the street to Channel 3 and do a game show. Wow. And he has a couple of distinctions. Number one, as you're going to hear in this next clip, he beat out Dick Clark in the audition for the morning show, and he lost his game show on Channel 3 to Mike Douglas when Mike Douglas came into the market. So here's just, I want you to listen to, no, this is a longer clip, but you're going to hear two things here, and I might come in the middle. You're going to hear a little overview of Wee, in his own words, in an interview that was done a few years ago. And then you're going to hear an actual clip from January the 2nd, 1963. Just some outtakes from his morning show, when you will find out that it's 2 degrees, and just a bit of what this stuff sounded like back in the day when we were kids.
I was the Honshu Cowboy, which covered Japan and Korea and the South Pacific and Alaska on Armed Forces Radio. So I stayed out of combat, which was a blessing for everybody. We're looking for a morning children's host. If you want to audition, show up tomorrow at 1 o'clock. I showed up. Dick Clark showed up. 2 or 3 other guys showed up, and we auditioned. Fortunately, I won the audition. After that, Dick left town, and I really don't know whatever happened to him. No, I don't mean that.
Wee Willie, Bill Weber, welcoming you to breakfast time. This is Wee Willie Weber welcoming you to our Thursday edition of Breakfast Time. Got a whole slew of wonderful, wonderful things lined up for you. First of all, how about this Harvey Toon cartoon?
I had a little guy called Elmo Whiffleweather, a little unicyclist who was on a string. He brought the weather in. So his name was Elmo, and of course WFIL, Whiffleweather.
We went down to the shore. We even went to the zoo.
If you forget about the beard, but if I were to draw 2 little circles for eyes and a nose and turn my mouth, or a little pencil that looked like my mouth was upside down, and then I had an upside down puppet, I could turn the camera upside down and it would be like a talking mouth.
But right now it's 7:48 and time for Rocky and his friends.
I was the first voice and the first face on Channel 17. This was 3 o'clock in the afternoon to about 7 at night. And we parenthesized all of the shows that we had. Tobar the Eighth Man, Astro Boy, Ultraman, Man from U.N.C.L.E., Marine Boy, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. We did all of those shows, and I would do little bits in the beginning, in the middle, at the end.
I consider myself a fine horseman, and here I am coming out of the stall, of the stable, all set to mount the horse and everything.
And then on Fridays, we would have a peanut gallery. And we would play games. We would play musical chairs or whatever. So that was the basis for that. I think I added it up. I did something like 30,000 hours on television just in the kids market. I've considered myself very, very fortunate to be involved in this radio and television business because this is fun. This is a way of giving people enjoyment and happiness.
That's the news. Jim McCann reporting. Now stay tuned to Channel 6. Here comes Bill Weber.
Now, I'm going to talk over this a bit because you don't have the visual. What you'd be seeing here at the beginning of his morning show is this incredibly low budget but compelling little production of him entering the station in very fast motion. He comes running into the studio at 46th and Market. He runs into some poor schlub in the hallway. Papers go flying in the air. He can't get the time card to work. And then he'd show up and here he was on set.
Hi. Wee Willie, Bill Weber, welcoming you to breakfast time. Boy, 2 degrees in the Delaware Valley. It's expected to get much colder as far as tomorrow is concerned. So stick around. If your car won't start today, it's just not going to turn over at all tomorrow. This is Wee Willie Weber welcoming you to our Thursday edition of Breakfast Time. Got a whole slew of wonderful, wonderful things lined up for you. First of all, how about this Harvey Toon cartoon?
Would you believe it? I have a cold. And friends, the problem with his cold is his sinus cavities. Yes, as you notice up here, he's in bad shape. Oh, brother. You think you got problems this morning? Look at him. And his car won't start either. Mercy, his brain won't go. Oh, back to the Mau-Maus for you. There you go. Hi, Wee Willie Weber here on Breakfast Time. Let me check the time for you. It's 26 minutes. 26 past the hour of 7 on a very frigid day in the Delaware Valley. 2 degrees above zero. It's expected to go below zero tonight. It's only expected to get up to about 10 degrees today. The cold wave is upon us. And we have a member of the Polar Bear Club, you know, the guys that swim, you know, in ice-cold, frigid water. And I'd like to introduce him right now, our Polar Bear member on Breakfast Time. What? Oh, he's given up. Friends, he's reneging. He's out of the pool. Look, wait a second, he has a sign there. What does that sign read?
Now, the thing you have to remember about Wee Willie and this whole era is that, yes, they were doing original programming at a local station, but they had no budget to work with. So if you look at again, I would encourage you, look them up on the Tube of You. There's lots of stuff out there.
But you know, having no budget didn't affect us in any way. We still were entertained.
Absolutely.
And enjoyed it and sat there wrapped in front of the television.
He did things by simply reversing film and appearing to jump out of things instead of jump into them. And of course, Charlie Chin Chopper that you heard a little bit of there. When I was a kid, now by the way, for those who didn't catch it, Charlie Chin Chopper was a character that he created because he had no budget. He basically cut out a hole in a piece of cardboard, and then he would get upside down. He would paint like hair and eyes on his chin, and basically it was his mouth upside down. And he would do that voice like this, you know, he would talk. And as a kid, that totally blew me away. It's this little body with a moving mouth. And I thought, that is just so cool. You know what I'm saying? And I remember as a kid getting crayons and probably permanent marker, which made my parents happy, and drawing little eyes and a little hair on my chin and trying to do my own version of Charlie Chin Chopper. But there he is, Wee Willie Weber, gang. And of course, he made the move over to WPHL channel, as he said in that clip. He was the first voice or image ever seen on WPHL, and he mentioned some of the iconic cartoons, Tobar the Eighth Man, Astro Boy, all those limited animation cheap things they got from Japan back before the anime was anime. Mm-hmm. That's what that was. Right. And I've asked you this question. I know you don't remember, but he used to push this product, this candy that for a while was all the rage, and I guarantee created more dental work than anything ever created in the Philadelphia area. It was this weird thing called a Popo-Lick, and a Popo-Lick, for the uninitiated, was basically this big hunk of caramel on a stick, see? And they put this like cheap chocolate over it, and they would put little nuts inside the chocolate, and the concept was as you licked it, the nuts would pop out into your mouth, you see? So there was this whole phenomena. Okay. And I personally believe again, for an entire generation of kids, that the Pop-O-Lick was a gateway drug. And now, while we're on the subject of limited animation, I have to just do a real quick little. I won't spend much time here because the time is already running out. One of the weirdest limited animation cartoons, and it was very big. I believe Sally Starr played this cartoon. I'm almost positive Wee Willie played it at one time. It was maybe the lowest budget cartoon ever created, because the only animation it had, really, would have basically stills cut together, and the only animation it had was the lips that would move. They apparently did some kind of weird photo trick where they would get real lips and they would superimpose it on this body. So it was this very Charlie Chin Chopper-like effect. And the whole thing had this very kind of, for its time, a very cool kind of film noir hipness to it. And if any of you have guessed, or you'd like to guess who this is, I'll go ahead and give it away. The name of the cartoon, if any of you remember this, was Clutch Cargo.
Clutch Cargo with his pal Spinner and Paddlefoot in another exciting adventure, The Big X.
Paddlefoot, what is it? Look, Clutch, a paper airplane flew in the window.
What? How could that be? We're on the 85th floor.
Hey, something's written on it.
What does it say, Spinner?
It says, help, something big, come at once. And it's signed Professor Stargazer.
Professor Stargazer? Why, he's the outstanding space observer of our time. If he sees something big, it must be awfully big. Come on, Spinner. We've got to get to his observatory right away.
But the plane is in the repair shop, Clutch.
We'll take Timmy Murphy's dragster. He said we could use it in case of emergency. We'll take the shortcut straight across the desert.
Clutch Cargo. I'm so glad you got my message. Come up here quick. I want you to take a look at something. In here.
Why, it's a big thing.
Something I rarely hear, by the way.
In 4 hours, 32 minutes, and 12 seconds, mountain time, that big thing will collide with the moon.
Why, it'll crush the moon to bits.
Exactly, Clutch. That's why I called on you.
Now, I want you to listen carefully to the segment that comes next, and remember that this is pre-space program, okay?
Count on you, Clutch. But how?
Well, now, let's see. Cape Canaveral's big beastie is in orbit, and Minerva the Third blew up on the pad.
Oh, dear. Then there's no space rockets available.
Hey, Clutch. What about Professor Knockwurst, the rocket wizard?
Good boy, Spinner. We'll have to hurry.
Yeah, so you're going to meet Professor Knockwurst, the rocket wizard, whom I think is a stand-in for Werner von Braun. I'm thinking. So there was Clutch Cargo, and Clutch Cargo had a jaw so square it could actually cut glass. It was amazing, and he was just the epitome of cool. This big muscle-bound guy, and you know, he was always borrowing hot rods and saving the moon from imminent destruction. So there you go, another icon. So now we're going to take a walk on. We've been dealing with, of course. We've been dealing with cowboys and Indians and Wee Willie and that whole crowd. Now we have to visit with two people that are really, I almost think of in the same vein in a way. Okay, one of whom essentially was a camp counselor who answered the call for an audition to do a kid show, and he answered it because he was pretty good at telling stories and he could draw. And I'm not even going to bother to introduce him because I don't think he really needs any introduction.
I taught puppetry, then I taught dramatics, but the best part of it all, what changed my life, I learned at that camp how to play to the counselors and the kids at the same time. That was a rare and wonderful gift.
Hi, everybody. Oh, it's very nice to see you this wonderful Sunday morning. I'm very proud that you can wake up on time to watch my program. We're going to be doing so many different things today. I'll be telling you a story in the history of the world. I'll be drawing a picture for you, too. I'll be showing you how you can make a beautiful hanger present for Mother.
When I did the show, they gave me a set that was an old general store. And They redecorated it and painted flowers on it like it was Pennsylvania Dutch. My director was named Jim Crayer. What a lovely man. And he's the one who wrote the song, Come Right On Into the General Store.
We have licorice, gumdrops, sour balls, anything that you're hankering for. You find it Cards and Corners General Store.
It was such a song that I love singing. I love the set. It had a potbelly stove. I still have my register here, and I have everything from that show. I saved them. Can you believe it? In one of my warehouses. And Mr. Dibley was Scrooge. He was the mean one that I was always scared of, could never ask for a raise. Of course, all I got was 2.5 cents, and in time that worked into 3.5 cents. And we both know how I got the half cent. He would just...
Let's pretend that it's story time, and I'll tell a tale to you. I'll tell you a story of make-believe, and all your dreams will come true. And when the story's over, and when we reach the
Now,
end...
as we listen to the organ, I'm going to ask you a quick quiz question. Who do you think was playing the organ in the background?
Let's pretend...
Yes, little girl? Yes?
Larry Ferrari.
That is correct.
Yes, yet another Philly icon.
Cafe. Once upon a time, there lived a great and very industrious, fine people. They were the Chinese, and they were the first to do many things. The first to make paper, the first to learn how to print on paper, the first to make firecrackers and gunpowder. Long time ago, I heard a story all about a tree that grew in a place called Raintree County. And this tree had blossoms of gold. And I thought someday I'd look for that tree, and I'd find it, and I'd be rich. And so when I was bigger, I went away, left home, and looked everywhere for this Raintree County and blossoms of gold on a golden tree, but I never really found it. Now I'm older and wiser, and I know that Raintree County can be anywhere.
The art of storytelling is so wonderful that one person can be an orchestra, a crew, all the actors, and make words come to life. There should be more of that on television, more of that in school, more of that in home life.
And more of that on the radio. Of course, there is, right here on Theater of the Mind. That, of course, Gene London. Gene London basically he was a storyteller and he could draw things. And he gets this job. He was a camp counselor. Went to an audition, got this gig, became this iconic figure. A couple quick things. He is very much alive and well, living in New York today. And he's retired, of course, but what he does and what he's known for is he has the largest collection in the world of Hollywood famous movie dresses.
Interesting.
To my best of my knowledge, he does not wear them, but he collects them. Now, here's a quick little story. There's a guy... you just think about these people, and you look up to them, and you sort of idolize them. There's a radio guy. He's on satellite, and he was on the old Ron and Ron show in Tampa years ago. He's a Philly guy. And he was telling the story that, once he found out that Gene London lived in New York, he looked him up. And he wanted to have him on his show. And he was like starstruck. He was going to have Gene London on his nationally syndicated Sirius show. But the starstruckedness went the other way. Here's Gene London, retired for probably 25, 30 years, who has a limo pull up in front of his apartment building and take him to a studio in the middle of Manhattan. And it was a really touching, cool story. Now, there was a counterpart, in a way, to Gene London. And this counterpart actually probably made it the biggest of all of them, in the sense that she became syndicated. In many ways, you can't think of Gene London without thinking of this person. The fact that they both worked for Channel 10 is probably one of those reasons, the CBS affiliate. So again, she really requires no introduction whatsoever. So I'm just going to let you go back in time now and listen to a bit of her voice.
Pixanne. Fly with me now through my magic forest, and we'll share lots of adventures and fun today. Don't go away.
Well, Dalrymple, I see you're very studious today. What were you reading about?
Well, I was reading all about the craters.
The craters on the moon? No kidding. Well, let's see if you've learned anything about them. How are craters formed?
So that's Pixanne. And of course, she was dressed up in these great-looking green tights, which could explain my early attraction. But some interesting things you might not know about Pixanne. She made her first appearance as a vocalist, as a singer, at the age of 3.
Wow.
When she was 8, she wrote a musical composition that was performed by the Philadelphia Orchestra. Her real name is Jane Norman. And she became syndicated. She began the show on WCAU, the CBS owned and operated station in Philadelphia. And after a couple years, she was picked up by 20 other markets. So she is so kids that grew up in other places like New York and LA all remember Pixanne. And she is on Facebook. She's got a Twitter account.
Does she?
So you can look up Pixanne. Look
she
up.
Was my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because she lived in a forest and she wore green. She used to like flit a lot.
Yes,
Pixanne,
she did.
She was very good at flitting.
She would fly.
She would flit and fly, and she was a heck of a singer. Let's listen to her hold forth here for a bit.
Better off than you are. Or would you rather be a pig?
Perfectly balanced. And now, fall deeper and deeper asleep. I want you to feel yourself weightless now and flying through the sky.
See, weightless and flying once again. This whole thing was a gateway drug. You were weightless and flying. You were chanting weird Indian things. And the next thing you know, you're doing mushrooms and acid, and that the rest, as they say, is history. I'm telling you, an entire generation of kids they did this to.
In the circle of the universe, passing over you and yourself passing through it.
He's describing an acid trip. He was like that Moody Blues album. Breathe deep the gathering gloom. Watch lights fade from every room.
Meanwhile, back at the oven, said I.
So that was Pixanne. That was Pixanne. Now that brings us to, well, to the last. Now again, there are other names. Again, we could never possibly get this entire show in an hour. There's just too much to cover. But we are going to cover this last guy here in just a minute. A couple of the other names that we didn't get to. We did not, by the way, get to Captain Noah. Captain Noah I'm a little on the young side for Captain Noah. That may have been more in your wheelhouse, Joe.
Mr. Green Jeans?
Well, now we're talking Philly people now. Yeah. Just Philly people. We're not talking Captain Noah. That you're thinking of Captain Kangaroo.
Oh, Captain Kangaroo.
Yeah. Now the Captain Noah show, also syndicated, by the way, is noteworthy in the fact that many celebrities appeared on Captain Noah. Among them, John Lennon appeared on Captain Noah. The Philly Fanatic was officially debuted on Captain Noah. And Jon Stewart first appeared in the Captain Noah show as a 17-year-old stand-up comic. So there you go. Captain Noah brought all of that stuff to the world. But again, that's a little bit further down the track. Now we're going to come to the guy that, at least in my life, has had both the greatest influence because, well, you're not going to have the visual for this next clip, but I want you to close your eyes and imagine. Remember I told you about those two little lumps of clay, the one wearing the dungarees and the striped shirt and the other one wearing the little dress with the bow? Okay, well, I'm the little lump of clay in the dungarees, see? And I'm about 6 years old, and I actually was on a television show, okay? I got to be one of the kids in the audience. And it was the first time I saw the magic, you see, the lights and the camera. I got to step through the box. I got to step through the flickering black and white image to the reality beyond. But of course, with every step through the looking glass, well, as you know, there's always a price to be paid.
How are you this morning? Well, that's good. What's your name? How old are you? 4 years old? My goodness. Well, how did you get so pretty in just 4 years? You've been taking pretty pills. Haven't you? I bet you have. There she goes. Come on, here we go.
Now, the voice you are hearing belongs to a guy named Howard Jones, who was, again, a disc jockey on WFIL, who then became the ubiquitous Happy the Clown.
Mr. Mike. Good morning, Mr. Mike.
I want you to pay close attention to those sticks you hear banging together. Do you hear that?
Mr. Mike.
Yeah, and then he would get on this little tractor that was all made up like a train, and you get on the train and he would drive you around the studio, Happy the Clown would. And then he would sing a song at the end. It sounded like this.
Always kind and true in the games we play and the work we do.
So Happy the Clown was this rotund, rather corpulent radio disc jockey who got dressed up as a clown, and he had the clown makeup. This was before clowns were creepy. This is before clowns were associated with John Wayne Gacy that had bodies buried beneath the porch. And Happy the Clown was my favorite of all. He was the one that for some reason just got to me. And when I found out that it was possible for a regular kid type, a little clod of clay like me, to actually be there in the audience, well, it simply had to be. And I bugged and bothered and pestered my mother until eventually she rode away and got these tickets, you see. And on the momentous day, we go down to 46th and Market Street, where the studios were, and there we are sitting in this big sound stage, and there's Happy himself, in color, by the way, which was a real amazing thing. I thought the world was in black and white. He's really in color, and he's really happy, and then we're driving on, we're doing all this stuff. And if you heard the little kids banging those sticks together, they were called marching sticks. Nothing more than little dowels of wood they probably went down to the Woolworth and bought. But they were marching sticks. And if you went on the Happy the Clown show, you got your own set of marching sticks. Back at home, you see, just when I was a little clod in front of the TV, I would bang on anything because I didn't have my own set of marching sticks. But because I got to be in the audience, I got my own set of marching sticks. Now, I got to tell you, those two sticks were, for the longest time, and possibly to this day, my most prized possession ever. When I came home from that show, of course I lied about all of it because I made out that I was really the star of the show, but I was the envy of my neighbor because I actually had the sticks. I could then sit in front of Happy the Clown. I could bang my own marching sticks together. Now, this was huge. It's like when you get older, it's like that car you lust after and finally own. You know, that first time you get in that leather seat, it's like that hot chick that'll never go out with you, and she eventually says yes. It's like you finally made it to the mountaintop. I had the marching sticks. Now, time goes on, as it does. Your life takes other turns. Happy the Clown and marching sticks and all the rest of it eventually were in my past, not in my present. But I never forgot those sticks. Never. Not ever. And I'll never forget the day, as it comes finally to all of us, when it's time to move out and move on with your life, that I asked about my marching sticks. I was going to pack them and take them with me to college. And my mother looked at me and she said, "What, you mean those stupid sticks that were in your toy box? Oh, I threw those away a long time ago." You threw my marching sticks away? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's still a little bit close. So you see, I was formed for good and ill by the icons of Philadelphia kids programming, as I know you were. So look into your heart and soul, gang, and you know what you're going to see staring back? A clown, that's right.
I'd say that was a pretty successful broadcast.